In those days, the crest was in service to the shade, protectors of Heartvale. In the months since we arrived in that city, I've enjoyed the steady ground beneath my feet. There was no sea where I was born, in the heart of the Cometian Empire. It was not until my 12th year that I saw a body of water larger than a very small lake. I marvel at those who seem at home on the sea more so than on land. A Winestone walks the deck as though he was born to it, while myself and some of the others struggle to ensure we do not lose our meals. We are but a day out from Heartvale, and Steward Seta has informed us that the journey to Davennar will take us at least 2 weeks, if the sea winds favor us. She has informed us that while there is currently peace between Heartvale and Davennar, there is no love lost between the two great city-states. Pirates and privateers aplenty patrol these waters seeking easy prey. She also assures us that the Andanya could not be mistaken for easy prey. But still, the danger stands. We will put in at Velt for supplies before continuing on to Davennar. I am eager to see that city and once again feel the solidity of ground beneath my feet. And should pirates decide to attack, it may prove to be a fine distraction for our restless soldiers. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, the Crest soldiers begin their sea voyage to the city-state of Davennar. Will the journey pass quietly, or will trouble find them? Find out what happens on episode 44, Sea Travels and Travails. Last time, in the aftermath of the battle against Lady DePeza's both living and undead forces, the Red Fox took custody of Ephraim Fellheart. Through interrogation of Fellheart and the other Kingsword who were captured there, they learned that there was another member of the Kingsword who was Fellheart's personal lieutenant, if not the actual second in command of the Royal Dispatch Company itself, who was also a cultist of Vargosh. But that person went by a code name, and none of those who were captured were willing to give up an actual name for this person. It was decided that Ben, Arid, and Orchid, after spending some time recovering from their injuries, were going to be sent to Davennar with a detachment of other Crest soldiers, including the Lieutenant, Lephalia, Iron Gull, the Sergeant, and also Saga, the Analyst. But before that happened, before they left on the ship to Davennar, Ben received a visit from Erdira, the Shade, and she informed him that she was going to accompany him and the Crest to Davennar, along with a group of occultic infiltrators, specially trained shades who were going to assist the Crest in pursuing and ultimately destroying the cult of Vargosh. She also brings an offer from the Red Fox, a chance for Ben to speak with his imprisoned sister, a sister who has been decried as a murderer and a villain in the aftermath of the war with Davennar, and who was disowned by Ben's family and cast into prison. For the first time in years, Ben is able to speak with his sister Ravia, and during their conversation, he discovers that she fell foul of a cabal of warhawks within the ruling council of Heartvale. She presented evidence that this cabal was waylaying Davennaran representatives, murdering them and sending them back to Davennar to inflame the war. And her efforts ultimately led to Lord de Soto's mission to create peace. However, she also angered that cabal, and they conspired to cause her downfall. She was arrested, framed for murder, and imprisoned. She has written a record of the things that she learned in her time, and she passes those off to Ben before he leaves. Though he is sad to leave his sister behind in this imprisonment, those papers may hold the key to her release if he can survive the next few weeks of pursuing the Vidala family in Davennar. The soldiers of the Crest and the Shade assemble at the docks, and they board a drift ship called the Undanya. And from there, they make their way out into the sea and on towards Davennar. As the drift ship Undanya is sailing across the wine-dark Maracalaga, the Sea of Mists, Ben is sitting close to the prow. He has his sister's papers cradled in front of him, and he is quickly reading through them. And we're going to go ahead and set our scene here as Ben is using this opportunity to pass the time on the way to Velt. So that is going to be the scene setup. Chaos factor, which was at 5 in the previous scene, which essentially was that whole battle, I think forced the chaos factor up to 6. So we're going to roll our d10 and compare it against our chaos factor of 6 and see what happens. A 4, an interrupt scene. Okay, just get right into it here. So we're going to determine the event focus. 100. NPC positive. Interesting. Okay. And let's go ahead and roll our d10 for our NPCs. I've got 9 listed on here. And if I roll a 10, I'll just re-roll. 5. Erdira. It's an NPC positive for Erdira. Interesting. So our subject is 38. Inform. And subject 54. Investment. Inform. Investment. Or maybe information of an investment. What could she possibly be invested in? I feel like she's been pretty invested in Ben. So could she be informed of something that might help him? Is she taken into his confidence and Ben is able to share some of these things with her? That would be a positive for him. Would that necessarily be a positive for her? It could be if she is still a relatively junior member of the Shade and being able to track down a cabal of individuals who are interested in causing war with Davennar might actually elevate her status within the Shade. So it could be that, or could it be something else? Could she be informed of a different investment? One of the reasons she's going along is because she knows the Shade who is in Davennar. She's going to put them in contact. Could that be the investment I think it makes sense that it is related to Ben, because I think that since they're essentially trapped on this ship together, and I don't want to go so far as to say that the shade coins give them the ability to communicate over long distances or anything like that. I think it is a reference to her gaining information from Ben that could help her in the future to gain more status within her own organization. Because I think obviously she's the niece of the Red Fox, and that probably bears with it certain privileges, but it doesn't necessarily mean that she just gets the plum assignments all the time. I think she wants to be treated in a very egalitarian way within the organization, and so she is eager to prove herself, not to the Red Fox, but to her fellow Shades, that she's not just here because she is the niece of the Red Fox, but because she deserves to be here. Since this is an interrupt scene, I think the interruption here is that she approaches Ben while he's still looking through the first few pages of this document. And he's kind of, I think, found himself a little spot tucked away by some barrels where he can sit and read in peace. And she comes over and like sits down on the barrel looking out on the water. And she says, "Mind if I ask what you're reading?" Ben, I think, in that way that you do when you're caught reading something you're not supposed to, kind of folds the paper over and looks up at her. I think he was so drawn in and invested into it that he was taken unawares. And he says, "Just some light reading. I thought I would avail myself of this time to catch up on some reading that I haven't been able to for a while." Ordira is certainly very intelligent, and looking at the brief glimpse that she got of the paper, she says, "It looks like a handwritten script, written very furiously, and there seems to be a lot of anger behind it. Is this something you wrote, Ben?" Ben shakes his head. She says, "If you don't want to tell me, I understand. But we have become, I think, at least acquaintances, if not even friends, in the last few months that we have worked together. We have endured some dangerous times, you and I. You can trust me. I know the Shade reputation. We are spies and assassins, delvers of secrets. But you know me, Ben, by now. You know that you can trust me." Ben looks back at the papers, looks back up at Ordira, and then I think he says, "This is deeply personal. But you're right. I believe I can trust you, and so I will tell you something, at least. They're from my sister. She wrote this." Ordira nods and says, "Do you want to talk about it?" Ben spends some time thinking about that, and then he says, "What do you know of the trial of Ravia de Metza?" Ordira says, "I did some research when the Red Fox told me to come talk to you. She was accused of some terrible, terrible things. Things that I would not wish on anyone. And she was convicted of them, though she was not sentenced to death, as one might expect. I think many figured that that was simply because of her connection to the de Metza family, that they kept her from being executed. It's not unusual for those of us born of noble blood to be given special preferences. Ben shakes his head and says, "No, it's not, is it? That's part of why I go by the name I do. It came from a story that my sister used to read to me when we were young. The Adventures of Ben Winestone. Pirate, thief, debonair lover. All the good things in a story. I wanted to be something other than..." And here he pauses and looks at the deck. It says, "I wanted to be something other than another noble who got whatever they wanted. I saw what happened to my fellows when we were together in the Navy. I saw the orders given by our commanders. And I know that there were times when others were ordered to do things that I should have been ordered to do. And yet my captain held me back, kept me away from the worst of it. Do you know, in my years of service, I was never part of the first boarding party? Not once. And some might say that I should be grateful for that preferential treatment. But having seen the blood and viscera of those who boarded first, and known that they were just like me, citizens of Hartvale trying to defend their city, and yet because I had a name, I didn't have to spill my viscera all over the decks of Davennar ships. I got to stand back, where it was safe." He looks up from the deck and looks at her. "Adira, the war, according to the things that my sister claims, there are people out there who wanted that war to continue. And there's nothing stopping them from causing the war to start again. She tried to expose what little piece of their conspiracy that she stumbled upon. And they threw her in prison for it. Now I'm starting to wonder, if I have such a privilege to my name, as she did, shouldn't I use it to make the city better for others? My sister tried, and she was fortunate enough to get out alive. But shouldn't I strive to help them as well?" Adira nods and says, "I know what you mean. Carrying the von Triken name, much like the Demetza name, means something in the city. Means something in the higher echelons of power. But when people are starving on the streets, when people are forced to work their lives away in mines and workhouses, is it really worth anything to stand in that upper echelon? You're not alone, Ben. You're not alone wanting to make a difference in this city. If you share these things with me, maybe I can help. Maybe together we can make a difference for the city that we love." Ben looks out over the sea, and then he looks back at her and says, "It would be nice not to face this alone." And he hands over the first few pages of his sister's life's work. And together the two of them continue to read and absorb the information that Ravia Demetza has recorded on this cabal of warhawks. So they spend that time reading, and as we move out of the interrupt scene, we can continue on with our scene setup of pass the time on the way to Velt. What do we think that Arid and Orchid are up to? First of all, I would be remiss if I did not go ahead and do my patron roll, seeing as I missed that last time I started one of these contracts. And for Ben, his patron is Iron Gull, who is aboard ship here. And the patron roll involves rolling plus steady for Ben. And we're going to see where he starts in relation to his patron. 2d6 plus 3. 7 on the dice plus 3 is a 10. So on a 10 plus, your patron is happy with you. You and the player of your patron, that's me, should work out why this is. You may remove 1 disobedience if you have any. Ben doesn't have any disobedience from Iron Gull, but I feel as though the reason that Iron Gull is happy is because Fellheart almost escaped in that battle. And Ben and Ordira were able to recapture him and hold on to him. And I think Iron Gull has seen the effort that Ben has put in over the last few months of being with the Crest and is suitably impressed with the young man. And so I think Iron Gull maybe sees Ben tucked away up at the front talking to Ordira, and maybe he mistakes it. Maybe he judges that Ben and Ordira are having a different sort of connection than the one that they have. But whatever it is, Iron Gull just sort of like looks and nods and just kind of, yeah. All right, Ben. Take your time and enjoy yourself while you can. Once we get to Davennar, things will get more interesting. And then he's going to continue about his work. Now, Arid, as an adept, does not have a patron, so he does not need to roll anything. But Orchid, as the gauntlet, does have a patron. And I thought about making Iron Gull Orchid's patron as well, because that would make sense, right? But I like the idea of having a different officer of the Crest be Orchid's patron. So I chose Captain Netheridge. So I'm going to roll plus fierce for Orchid, and that will determine how Captain Netheridge is feeling. So plus fierce, plus 3, 7 on the dice, plus 3 is 10. So Captain Netheridge, I think maybe we get this brief scene of Netheridge meeting with Orchid as Orchid is about to head out after Netheridge gave this speech about them coming back. And the captain says, Orchid, you're heading off to Davennar with the others. You've done well so far, keeping them alive. Continue your good work, and we can continue our conversation about sending you back to Faramork to deal with those usurpers that you were telling me about. Orchid, who towers over Netheridge, even though Netheridge is relatively tall himself, nods and says, Thank you, Captain. It's an honor to continue serving the Crest, but if I can serve the Crest and Faramork as well, that would do my heart good. I'd love to be able to put an axe through those murderers and troublemakers in my homeland. But as always, I took my oath of service. I serve the Crest. I serve you. And you do so well, Orchid. Now get out there and bring back the heads of those Vidala. Aye, Captain. And Orchid moves out. So as we shift back to the sea voyage, I think we get an image of Orchid, and they are sitting looking out over the sea, and they've got a whetstone and they're ringing it along the edge of their axe blade, honing the sharpness of Bone Eater. And they are looking out into the vast openness of the sea, because Faramork is across the Maracaliga from Heartvale, and they're looking out their eyes lost in the distance. Does anything happen? Do they see anything out there? Because the Maracalaga is the Sea of Mists. And some say that these mists have always been there, and some say that the mists are a remnant of the shrouding of Elfheim. And sometimes sailors see things in the mists. So let's ask the question. Is there something out there that Orchid sees? I'm going to say it's 50-50, chaos factor of 6. 38 is a yes. Yes, there is something out there. What is it? Well, first of all, I guess the most obvious question is it a pirate ship? I think there's almost no way that it's a pirate ship because they're only a day out from Heartvale, and these waters are very heavily patrolled by the Heartvale Navy. So I'm going to say there's almost no way that this is a pirate ship. 23 is a yes. So it is a pirate ship. So I think Orchid, that's how these things go sometimes. Orchid is looking out over the vastness of the sea, and they see this bank of mist across the water. And the mist is churning, and there are lights playing off of it from the sun, reflecting off the water, reflecting off the mist. And Orchid is just staring into it, going through this meditative, rhythmic movement with the whetstone on their axe. And then their eyes narrow a little bit, as it seems as though there's movement within the mist. And they are leaning forward then, squinting at this mist that is not that far away. And then all of a sudden, emerging from the mist is the prow of a ship. And this ship is moving fast. The drumbeat then comes across the water as this ship is rowing hard. And Orchid, seeing that, looks around and opens their mouth to say something when a lookout calls out, "Ship to port!" And a flurry of activity begins on the deck as Steward Seta emerges from her cabin and sees this ship barreling towards them. And it is unmistakably barreling towards them. The wind around them suddenly dies out, and Orchid can almost taste the sorcery in the air as the sails on their ship go slack, and this ship is charging towards them, oars slapping the waves, drawing closer and closer. Orchid, standing, stows their whetstone, feels the edge of Bone Eater, and then smiles and says, "And I was afraid this journey would be quiet and boring. It's good to know that it's not going to be." As the drums on the Andania start up and the oars that had been stowed are cast out into the water to get the ship moving faster, Steward Seta, standing at the wheel, begins to turn the ship to meet this oncoming pirate vessel. There's a flurry of activity as Crest soldiers leap to their feet, reaching for weapons. Ben, near the bow, grabs the papers from Erdira and stuffs them away in his pack before picking up his crossbow and loading it. The pirate ship is bearing down on them and will be with them in moments. The Andanya has been caught unawares, but Steward Seta is no slouch as a ship's captain and begins maneuvering them to get into position to fight back. There are ballistae that are on the ship that are being loaded, and aft, Arid climbs up the steps to stand by the steward and says, "There is sorcery in the air, steward. Is there anything that we can do to help you?" Seta says through gritted teeth, "It feels as though they're binding the air, making it more difficult for us to move. If you can clear that up, it would be of great assistance." "Very well. We will see that it is done." And Arid is going to descend down the steps to where Lephalia is approaching. She says to him, "I trust you have a sense of what is required of us?" He nods and explains the situation. Lephalia smiles and says, "A water witch, how quaint. Well, shall we?" And they are going to begin casting. As this magic begins to swirl around them, Arid is going to attempt to harness the unspeakable power. And that is going to involve him rolling plus arcane. It'll be 2d6. Plus 2. Here we go. 5 plus 2 is a 7. So on a 7 to 9, the MC will also hold 1 and may spend it on one of the following. The power knows what you're doing and why you're doing it. The power asks for something minor in return. The power requests some small show of loyalty. Okay, so I think Arid closes his eyes and reaches out with his talent. He feels the air around them, and it is very much feeling like it is being dampened as he tests the bounds of this bubble that has basically been created around the Andanya that is going to keep the wind from catching in the sails. I think he's able to detect this bubble, and he's going to be able to unravel the sorcery that's holding it in place around the Andanya, but it is going to take time, and it is going to take more time than they have to escape from this situation. So that's the consequence that I'm spending that one hold on, is that Arid is going to be able to do it, but I think he is going to be distracted as the ships come into close proximity with each other. Iron Gull is arranging the crest soldiers in a mix of archers and crossbowmen preparing to fire at the oncoming ship, while the rest of the crest soldiers are drawing their weapons and preparing to repel boarders. Ben is one of those crossbowmen, and he is on the prow steadying his crossbow as he takes aim, and he is going to face duress as he is trying to line up a shot. And I think he's trying to actually wait for the last possible moment and then fire at the person who is guiding the ship to see if he can at least cause a little bit of chaos as they're getting in close. So we're going to roll 2d6 plus 3 because Ben has a steady of 3. Here we go. 6 on the dice plus 3 is a 9. So on a 7 to 9, you have flinched, stalled, or hesitated. You can pick one or two of the following and tell what it looks like if you take it. Then decide if you go through with what's been offered or back off. So you can achieve your goal, but it'll come at a price. You can achieve your goal, but only partially. You cannot achieve your goal, but can do something similar instead. I'm going to say the middle one. I can achieve the goal, but only partially. He is trying to steady himself on the crashing as the ship crashes over the waves and approaches this pirate vessel that's closing in. He's lining up his shot on the man who's holding the wheel on the opposing ship. And he takes a breath and holds it and then exhales it slowly. And then he pulls the release on the crossbow, and the bolt arcs out across the distance between these two ships. And it hits the man holding the wheel, but it doesn't hit him in his chest or in his throat where Ben was aiming for. No, it strikes him in the shoulder, and he kind of takes the bolt and spins around a little bit, but he's holding on to that wheel, and it keeps him from falling to the ground, and he's able to maintain course while his shoulder and arm are just bleeding profusely. As that happens, the two ships draw into range of each other, and here's the question. Are these pirates looking to sail past and like rake this ship with missile fire, or are they trying to get in close and board? I think it's more likely that they're trying to board. I think their original plan was to ram the side of the Andania, but with the quick action of Steward Seta, the Andania was able to foil that plan. But I think the goal here is to board and to duke it out on the decks of the Andania. So I'm going to say it's very likely that they're trying to board. Let's go ahead and roll our dice and see what happens here. 62 is a yes. They are trying to board. So they are coming in close. Now, I think the question is, are they able to position themselves in such a way that they can throw grappling hooks across and bring the two ships in together where they can board? I think it's 50-50. I mean, the Andania crew are used to this sort of thing. They're well trained, and they have the advantage of having crest soldiers and shade operatives on board as well. So they've got a few more hands available than even they normally would. So I think it is 50-50 on this. 83 is a no, so they're not. So these grappling hooks come flying out, but Orchid and other members of the crest and sailors on board the Andania quickly cut away at the ropes, and there's like this jolting stop as the hooks catch for a moment, and then once the cords are cut, the ship begins to move again as the oars are slapping into the water. And I think the next question is there a likelihood of them creating some distance and then trying to come around and maneuver in such a way that they can ram? And I think that is likely. 6 is an exceptional yes. So that is absolutely what they're both doing. They are both trying to maneuver their ships in order to strike at each other to get the optimal position. And I'm going to determine this by rolling my d10, and I think I'm going to roll it twice, and whichever ship gets the higher roll gets the better position. So the Andania will go first. Rolled a 5. The pirate ship also rolled a 5. So they are both attempting to maneuver, and they are not able to gain the advantage on each other as these two ships are continuing to jockey for position. Arid, I think, has burst that bubble of sorcery that is holding in the air, and it begins to flow again around the Andania. And now I wonder if they're going to attempt to assist the steward in granting their own propulsion and power. Maybe instead of the wind being held away, the wind is going to be captured and is going to be used to propel the Andania faster and further. So I think this is going to be another Harness the Unspeakable power, and I should make sure that I am marking my XP for these things. And this is going to be 2d6 plus arcane. 8 on the dice plus 2 is a 10. So on a 10 plus, it is a complete success. And the wind fills the sails and the Andanya leaps forward, propelling the ship faster. I think Ben is also going to attempt to fire another shot with his crossbow. He resets it and face arrests. Once again, he's going to target that navigator who is guiding the ship. Rolling +3 here. 11 on the dice plus 3 is a 14. So you've achieved what you set out to do. So the bolt strikes out at the figure, and this time it catches them in the throat, and they go down gurgling. And for a brief moment, there's no one at the controls of the pirate ship as others are struggling and scattering to try and get to the wheel in order to take back control of their ship. And I'm not even going to roll for it this time, as the Andanya is able to position itself in that brief moment of distraction and with that extra propulsion from the wind, and is closing in to ram the side of this pirate ship. Is the pirate ship broken in half by this ram? I think it's unlikely. Let's find out what the fate chart says. 24 is a yes. So the Andanya, this beautiful drift ship, comes cruising in, and the pirates are trying to get out of the way again. They're trying to regain control of their ship. And all of a sudden, there is a great crash as the ram on the head of the ship crushes into the wooden side of this pirate vessel. There's a great creaking and groaning, and then the pirate ship buckles and splits in half. And there are screams and chaos, and some of the pirates are thrown from each half of the ship into the water, and they're swimming and desperately trying to find some flotsam to hang on to. And the Andanya presses through the now open space between these two halves. Do any of these pirates make it onto the Andanya in that moment of closeness? I think it's almost impossible. 29 is a no. So a few are thrown and hit the side. I think one hits the railing and holds on, and then Orchid just reaches down and shoves them into the water. And the Andanya continues to sail through and past the two halves of this pirate ship as it begins to sink beneath the waters. Now, here is the other question. Is the steward of the Andanya interested in any way of offering aid to these pirates? Would they do such a thing? So the Drift are these people who believe in basically being free merchants, free sailors. They don't want to be part of the more hierarchical structure of Heartvale. So would they feel a certain kinship with these pirates? These pirates who are just trying to survive out on the seas without being ruled by any kings or rulers? I think it's possible. My original thought was that it was going to be no way that Steward Seta would offer them aid. I think it might actually be somewhat likely that she would offer them, at least to bring them on board and take them to shore, so they're not going to drown out here in the open ocean. Yeah, I'm going to say it's somewhat likely. So let's ask the fate chart. Here we go. 11 is an exceptional yes. So as the steward is guiding the ship, she calls out and says, Prepare to come about and make ready to take on survivors. And she is going to begin turning the ship as the drum beat slows down from that war pace to much closer to cruising speed. And the Andanya turns and begins to gather these pirates out of the water. Now, here's the thing. There are probably a decent number of pirates on this ship. And there's already passengers on the Andanya. So is there a whole lot of space here? And also, are Iron Gull and the lieutenant going to just let this happen? Or are they going to protest? So let's say, are the Crest going to protest the rescue of these pirates? I'm going to say 50-50. 49 is a yes. And I think it's Iron Gull. I think Iron Gull approaches the steward as the ship is getting into position to take on prisoners. And Iron Gull says, "Steward, I don't mean to tell you your business," as she gives him a look. "But are you sure it's wise to take on survivors? We'll have to guard them, and there is always the chance that it could lead to bloodshed. Isn't it better to just leave them there? Let them suffer the consequences of their choices?" Steward Seta looks at Iron Gull and says, "You may be a mercenary, Master Sergeant, and for that reason I can understand your sentiment. But I am a steward of the Drift. And there are members of the Drift who were pirates and brigands at one time in their lives. They chose a different path when they were offered a different path. I will not leave anyone in the waters to die of starvation and thirst, or to be eaten by the creatures that swim beneath the surface. Not when there's a chance that I could save their lives, and perhaps even their futures. We will bring them on board, and we will make for shore. Once we're outside of the bounds of the mountains of the Vale, we can put them ashore and let them find their own way. But no, I will not leave any of those men or women to die. Not while I have a choice." "Are you going to debate my choice, Sergeant?" Iron Gull looks at the steward and then shakes his head and says, "Of course not. It's not my place. I merely wanted to offer my opinion." "Your opinion has been noted, Sergeant. I would be appreciative if you and your soldiers would assist us in the recovery process. And you would help us to, as you say, keep a guard on these prisoners. Unless, of course, that is outside the bonds of our agreement, in which case I will ask you to simply stand aside while my men do their work." Iron Gull shakes his head and says, "No, steward, we'll be happy to assist." "Good. Then let's see that it's done." And the Andanya takes on survivors from this pirate ship and begins sailing towards where land would be in order to drop them off. Now, here's the thing. They survived this brief battle with these pirates. Is it possible that these pirates have any information that could be of use to the Crest? I think it's basically impossible, but we might as well ask the fate chart just in case. 32 is a no. So the Andanya continues to sail, and they sail further into the day, and the sun is beginning to set by the time that they see land once again. And as they come up close to the land, I think Steward Seta, who is well accustomed to making this journey, calls out to the prisoners and says, I am going to release those of you who wish to be freed. Those of you who would be interested in living the life of a drift sailor and being a free and contributing member of a society that cares for its own, feeds its own, and treats its own with respect, you may stay. All those who wish to go back to your pirating ways, you may go, but know this. If you cross paths with the Andanya again, my mercy may not be so swift and so open. Consider this a warning. Piracy is a life that many have chosen in these times. There are other options, and I would be happy to show them to you. Are these pirates moved by her speech? I think it's 50-50. 90 is a no. It's not an exceptional no. So I think a few of these pirates stick around, but most of them are ferried off the ship. Maybe they're probably even just like thrown off the ship into the water and they have to swim to shore. But most of them are going to go back to shore and make their own way. Those few who stay remain under guard, and the steward speaks with each and every one of them in turn. As the Andanya turns back to continue sailing towards Velt, Ben goes back to the bow and is looking out on the sea once again. He hears his friends, Arid and Orchid, approach, and he turns and sees them and he nods and says, well, it seems like our first day was already a bit exciting. Arid nods and says, it does. I hope that not every day is like this, or it will be a long and tiresome trip. Orchid chuckles and says, I was a bit disappointed. I was really hoping we were going to let them board. Bonator's getting a little hungry again. Ben, I think, looks at Orchid and says, you know, I'm starting to wonder if you're not being metaphorical and, in fact, your axe is hungry for blood. It's not hungry for blood, is it, Orchid? Orchid simply smiles and then looks out over the sea. Ben exchanges a glance with Arid, and Arid raises an eyebrow and sort of half shrugs. And then they too turn to look out over the sea as their journey to Davennar continues. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thank you so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at coffee.com/errantadventures. That's ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.